Yehovah Eloheinu Svaot. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Please fill me with the Ruach HaKodesh, that I may speak your written words with boldness to those who listen. We'll start with the Shema. Listen and obey. Children of Yehovah, pay careful attention and respond. Yehovah is our power and authority. Yehovah works in unity with himself, and you shall act upon your love to Yehovah with your power and authority, with your thoughts in mind, with your entire body, and with all the muchness that you have. Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. Hand, behold, nail, behold. Leviticus Chapter 15. Yehovah said to Moshe and Aaron, "Tell the people of Israel, when any man has a discharge from his body, the discharge is unclean. The discharge is unclean no matter whether it continues flowing or has stopped. It is still his uncleanliness. Every bed which the person with the discharge lies on is unclean, and everything he sits on is unclean. Whoever touches his bed to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, he will be unclean until evening. Whoever sits on anything the person with the discharge sat on is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water. He will be unclean until evening. Anyone who touches the body of the person with the discharge is to place his clothes and bathe himself in water. He will be unclean until evening. If the person with the discharge spits on someone who is clean, the latter is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water. He will be unclean until evening. Any saddle that the person with the discharge rides on will be unclean. Whoever touches anything that was under him will be unclean until evening. He who carries those things is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water. He will be unclean until evening. If the person with the discharge fails to rinse his hands in water before touching someone, that person is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water. He will be unclean until evening. If the person with the discharge touches a clay pot, it must be broken. If he touches a wooden utensil, it must be rinsed in water. When the person with discharge has become free of it, he is to count 7 days for his purification. Then he is to wash his clothes and bathe his body in running water. After that, he will be clean. On the 8th day, he is to take for himself 2 doves and 2 young pigeons, come before Yehovah to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and give them to the Kohen. The Kohen is to offer them, the one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. Thus the Kohen will make atonement for him on account of his discharge before Yehovah. If a man has a seminal emission, he is to bathe his entire body in the water. He will be unclean until evening. Any clothing or leather on which there is any semen is to be washed with water. It will be unclean until evening. If a man goes to bed with a woman and has sexual relations, both are to bathe themselves in water. They will be unclean until evening. If a water has a discharge, and the discharge from her body is blood, she will be in her state of nida for 7 days. Whoever touches her will be unclean until evening. Everything she lies on or sits on in her state of nida will be unclean. Whoever touches her bed is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water. He will be unclean until evening. Whoever touches anything she sits on is to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water. He will be unclean until evening. As soon as he touches the bed or something she sat on, he will be unclean until evening. If a man goes to bed with her and her menstrual flow touches him, he will be unclean 7 days, and every bed he lies on will be unclean. If a woman has discharge of blood for many days, not during her period, or if her discharge lasts beyond the normal end of her period, even throughout the time she is having an unclean discharge, she will be as when she is in nida. She is unclean. Every bed she lies on at any time while she is having her discharge will be for her like the bed she uses during her time of nida. And everything she sits on will be unclean with uncleanness like that of her time of nida. Whoever touches those things will be unclean. He has to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water. He'll be unclean until evening. If she has become free of her discharge, she is to count 7 days. After that, she will be clean. On the 8th day, she is to take herself 2 doves and 2 young pigeons and bring them to the Kohen at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The Kohen is to offer the one of the sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. Thus the Kohen will make atonement for her before Yehovah on account of her unclean discharge. In this way you will separate the people of Israel from their uncleanliness, so that they will not die in the state of uncleanliness for defiling my temple, which is there with them. Such is the law for the person who has a discharge, for the man who has a seminal emission and makes him unclean, for the woman in nida during her menstrual period, for the person, the man or woman with a discharge, and for the man who has sexual relations with a woman who is unclean. How can we learn to love our Creator after reading chapter 15 of Leviticus? We can listen to the written words of Yehovah. Know that in the time of Moshe, fluids from the body made someone unclean, and they had to wait days for others to be able to touch them, or even for them to touch specific items, or else the items would be unclean. Know that an offering made for the purpose of atonement was needed to make someone clean. How can we love others as Yeshua loves us? We can teach others to trust that Yeshua's blood sacrifice poured out on the cross atones for our sin. Bear one another's burdens. We can preach the good news of the sacrifice made by Yeshua, our high priest. Produce spiritual fruit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, humility, self-control. And we'll end with the Aaronic blessing. Yehovah will kneel before you presenting gifts, and he will guard you with a hedge of protection. Yehovah will illuminate the wholeness of his being towards you, bringing order, and he will provide you with love, sustenance, and friendship. Yehovah will lift up the wholeness of his being and look upon you and will set in place all you need to be whole and complete. Yivarechecha Yehovah, vayishmarcha Ya'ir, Yehovah panav elecha, vechunecha Yisa Yehovah, panav elecha, v'yachsem lecha, shalom. May Yehovah bless you and keep you. May Yehovah make his face shine on you and show you his favor. May Yehovah lift up his face toward you and give you peace.